Evert Niebuhr?
I say Evert Niebuhr.
Oh, excuse me.
That's okay. Well, I should say, since colleagues are here, that this is a project that the principal investigators and the team came from Laval University and also from McGill University, and myself from McMaster University, and of course the Cree Board of Health, and Elizabeth and Laura are here as part of the team. So time is limited, as every speaker says. I have 8 slides, so if you keep count, you know I'm coming to the end. I've tried to tailor this thing to the workshop, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project, a little bit about the findings, and then how we disseminate it, or in the process of disseminating the information. Just a brief history. It started for me when I was asked to review the Culver report, a report that was made to the community of Ogier-Bougama, and there were a lot of issues in that, and so it was an environment and health report, and I sort of made 2 recommendations. One, that a long-term, proper and systematic environmental risk assessment be done. And that has come to fruition now, and they're now at the point of remediation, which I heard this morning, so I'm very happy about that. The second recommendation is that a systematic environment and health study be done of Ogier-Bougama, the community, because there are health implications of the Colville report. And then, of course, we needed a control community, and that was Nemaska. That was done in 2002. The report was in 2005. And then we thought, well, with the Cree Board of Health, because under their mandate, maybe all of this should be applied to all the communities. And so we did a needs and feasibility study in 2003, 2004. All communities were visited, and good support was expressed. We then, as a pilot project, did Mysticiny in 2005, and there was a report on that. We changed a little bit of the approach to the field work to systematize a little bit better and to get the glitches out. And so the other communities then were done, 2 per summer, in the sort of late summer, early autumn for the years indicated. And then a second report came out, it's called the Waminji report. Well, first of all, the scientific objectives, I'll keep them very simple. We wanted to look at contaminants in terms of nutrient intake or the diet, and also then to look at the contaminants again in terms of health outcomes, and also then, of course, that's very difficult to do if you do not consider lifestyle. We then also, because there was concern about spring water is used as a drinking water in many communities, so we wanted to look at that, whether there were sort of microbial contamination of that, and also if there was a transfer of disease from animals to man. That's called zoonosis, and that was done as well. So I want to emphasize that this is a very systematic study where all the same protocols were used in every community. And that's very important if you're going to develop a database. We're in the process now of publishing many papers to have it all done in the same way. The type of things is quite common. You have questionnaires. You want to find out about the individual questionnaires, and these were all sort of done in English or Cree, and they were recorded. So store-bought food, traditional foods, and also a 24-hour recall that's very useful for the dietitians to use to calculate energy intake and so on. Many measurements of anthropometric or body measurements, and you can read them for yourself. And then we looked at a whole suite, if you like, a whole of toxic metals, essential elements. Some of them are metals as well, like such as copper, and so on. And selenium is a non-metal. And then pesticides and PCBs. You heard much about them. And collectively, we call these POPs, sort of persistent organic pollutants would be is the long term. Then the kind of measurements that one gets done before you see your annual checkup with your doctor. You look at many things that are in the blood that tells you a little bit about your state of health, and these were measured as well. And then also antibody tests were done to see if there was a history of a transfer of disease from animals to humans, and then also looking at the drinking quality. Then I have 3 slides on messages, and I've just taken them, and later on I'll tie that up with the reports. And as everyone knows, and this is not new, certainly obesity and diabetes are really major health issues. And it's even in teenagers, this is becoming a problem. We measured sort of blood flow to the brain was measured, and the clogging of the measures the clogging of the arteries, and already beginning to see that in young people. And of course, there are also many young women have already early signs of diabetes. And then women are at higher risk for both diseases. Then an issue that is very, very important, that is smoking. And the smoking prevalence was really quite high. Perhaps I should say is between 30 and 35%, depending on gender, which is quite high. And certainly we know the lung cancer, but what people do not know that when you smoke, in the smoke there is the metal cadmium, and it's really very toxic to the kidneys. And so at the end of a smoker's life, the kidney function is at the bottom of normal or abnormal. And so smoking has more than one punch. And so these obviously can be translated, and you can read this yourself, into strategies. And some of these strategies are already in existence, and obviously they need to be strengthened. Then, because the dietitians and everybody agrees that traditional foods, the game is a good source of omega-3 fatty acids. Another dimension is if you eat that, then you don't eat so much junk food, and that is very helpful as well. In terms of the vitamin D, we're both sort of or if you like, calculated based on the diet, looking at the foods that have vitamin D in them, but also they were measured in the blood. And certainly there's some deficiency of vitamin D. Not surprising, because it's a long, long winter, and perhaps some supplementation would be helpful. We looked at 9 elements, so maybe I can name them, sort of copper and zinc and selenium, and we looked then at the cadmium, lead, and mercury, and so that will give you an idea of what we have done. And so most of them were in the normal ranges. We looked at arsenic and iodine in urine as well, and mercury and arsenic in hair as well. And we're analyzing all of that at the moment. Well, there's no doubt, there's a paper that we've already submitted, that the cadmium in the blood comes from smoking, basically. We looked and we tried to identify whether the contribution of eating organs, especially kidney and liver, because there's a lot of literature suggesting that might be a source to worry about. And I think we can say with confidence that the main source is really a cigarette, if you're a smoker. We've looked at lead a lot, and we're able to show, as part of a study many years ago on the west side, where we looked at abdominal X-rays, and you could see pellets in the gut of individuals, and that sort of comes part of in other words, when the bullet strikes the animal, it shatters. So if you look under a microscope, you see tiny pieces of lead, and you even see whole pellets, and people swallow them, and so that is a source of lead as well. But we've shown that for hunters, when you use the gun, when you see the puff of smoke, there's also lead in that, and so the smokers before and after the hunt have higher lead, and so it's really good to keep pushing on banning the use of lead shot, because it definitely is a source of lead, and especially we worry about children and women of reproductive age. So it's not only the hunters, but also if you eat a lot of food and it isn't cleaned up properly, then that becomes a source for others as well. And of course, everybody goes to the hunting grounds, and so are near guns as well. And then some minor effects of mercury on heartbeat. Nothing really to worry about, but it could be detected. And then the last message, basically these things there's not many guidelines. The Health Canada has some guidelines, and we ourselves had guidelines, and certainly there were some exceedances, but they tend to be in the older people, and the most sensitive is between 15 and 39, and younger children. And very happy to say that all these mercury, lead, and these POPs, these organic chlorines, that they're pretty low in that age group. And so we want to make sure that stays that way, and so there can be some dietary advice in relation to that. but also listening to all of the mining. I myself, I'm a specialist in metals, and I advise a lot of public health departments in Northern Ontario that deal with these issues. We certainly, I think, this database will be very helpful in the future because we know what things were between 2005 and 2007 or 2009. You know, there's all these things are measured in the body. Also, there was some evidence that some individuals in the past had been infected. In other words, that the agent is known to come from animals, and that is related to disease. Nothing really serious, but again, to reinforce the guidelines that this is a possibility and that should not be forgotten. And then obviously we found that what was interesting in one of the communities, the spring that was used by most to get the water, people drink tap water and many drink spring water, was the most contaminated, bacterial contamination. So again, boiling water, as Elizabeth will tell you over and over again, it's very important that you, especially when you're in the bush, and surface water would have the same issue. Then, this is my last slide, dissemination tools. What we did is we went to every community and we presented the results at a log, at a meeting of the community. And then we had some handouts, and if I have some time, I can show you one that we used. And so each community, while we were there at the presentation, we handed out a sheet of 2 pages that summarized the results for that community. Now this is a beast. This is the final report. Together with the appendices, is about 500 pages, and maybe if you have time, I can show you the cover. And then from that, someone named Elena Babbitt, and she made sort of more popular reports. These are about 60 pages long. The text of this is probably close to 300. In any case, so what he did to first of all, this is a summary report, a popular report, more popular language, down to earth, with some of the things that I have mentioned, backing that up. And so all the communities will get that, and so that summarizes this one in total, if you like. And this one, each community will get their own report, the same length, but with the data for that particular community. So again, this is a way of disseminating the information. And so this one was just completed, and if I have time, maybe we can show the two. Well, you can take them in any order you want. Yeah, so here it's a flashy cover. Maybe Elizabeth wanted to say something. It will be available on the Cree Board of Health sort of website in the library, so it will be accessible to everyone. This is sort of Reggie Tomatuk who took the photograph, and then all the communities' sort of emblem is on it as well. And you don't want to show the next one. No, this is the cover of the big final, the handout coming next year. Would you like the handout? Yeah. So it's 2 pages, and so you can, I don't know if you can, it's probably too small to see, but you can see we summarize. Without my glasses, I can sort of about the project. Educational activity, we did that as well, and we had really good coordinators for that, and they really got the kids excited about science, and they got to sort of talk to the scientists as well, and work people collecting the samples and so on. Anyway, so there's Laura. So if you want any questions about that, you can ask Laura. Okay, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. So moving along, we have our next presenter, Joanne Moras.
Oui, bonjour. Merci pour l'invitation. J'étais tellement contente quand Mark Jetton, il n'est pas là? Ah, il est là. Il m'a appelé parce que je faisais littéralement du harcèlement pour avoir de l'information. C'est pour ça que tantôt, il me regardait du coin de l'œil en disant accès à l'information. Parce que une des missions qui incombe au nouveau gouvernement régional DIU James, pour lequel je dirige le département ressources naturelles et territoires, et de produire un PRDIRT, cet acronyme qui veut dire un plan régional de développement intégré des ressources et du territoire, pour, dans notre cas, les terres de catégorie 3. Puis la façon, ça, c'est tout le Québec là, qui doit produire un PRDIRT. Les 17 régions du Québec ont produit leur PRDIRT, mais comme le gouvernement régional vient de venir au monde, là, un newly born joint venture, depuis le 1er janvier, le conseil d'administration du gouvernement régional des JBACE est composé de 11 chefs CRI et de 11 élus jamésiens, plus un représentant du gouvernement. Et ils reprennent toutes les fonctions et responsabilités qu'avait jadis l'ex-MBJ, Municipalité de la baie James, plus les responsabilités qui incombaient à la commission régionale, entre autres, faire le PRDIRT, le plan régional, et la gestion des tables GIR, des tables de gestion intégrée du territoire. Donc, une des premières étapes pour pouvoir produire le PRDIRT, c'est de pouvoir ramasser toutes les connaissances scientifiques qui ont été acquises là, à ce jour sur le territoire. Et dans le précédent exercice de la CRIBJ, la Conférence régionale des élus avait eu pour mission de produire le PRDIRT. On s'est rendu jusqu'à une étape préliminaire, mais on avait eu le temps de produire 6 portraits. C'est aujourd'hui ce que Marc m'avait demandé de présenter. Ce qui a été produit à ce jour, on a fait un portrait des connaissances forestières. Et ça date tout, on a eu des livrables là, tout aux alentours de 2010. On en a fait un qui est le portrait territorial de la baie James, le portrait minier, le portrait faunique, le portrait hydrique et le portrait énergétique. Globalement, ce qu'on demandait aux gens, on a fait des appels d'offres, là, puis c'est des firmes professionnelles, là, pour la plupart, là, qui ont rédigé les portraits. Et on leur a demandé, on leur a pas demandé de faire de la recherche, là, on leur a demandé de nous dire ce qui existait comme recherche documentée, puis de nous en faire un document qu'on pourrait mettre sur Internet là, pour que tout le monde puisse s'en servir pour utilisation future. On a demandé également, en plus du portrait, à ceux qui ont fait le portrait, on leur a demandé de nous recommander quelles seraient les connaissances qui seraient utiles pour pouvoir faire un meilleur plan de développement. Puis à l'intérieur de chacun de ces portraits-là, les spécialistes nous ont recommandé quelles pistes on devrait emprunter pour améliorer nos connaissances. Et dans le nouvel exercice, avec le personnel là, du GREI-BJ, le gouvernement régional, on va, à certains égards, reprendre là, ou poursuivre là, les portraits, là, pour, dans certains cas, mettre à jour, mais de faire un portrait global. Il y a certains portraits que les spécialistes nous ont recommandé, une mise à jour s'imposait, entre autres pour le portrait forestier. Parce que le portrait forestier, malgré qu'il y a beaucoup d'informations là-dessus, les spécialistes qui l'ont dressé nous ont mis en garde que toute l'information ou les analyses qui ont été produites ont été faites à partir du 3e inventaire décennal. Tous les 10 ans, à peu près, le ministère des Ressources naturelles va faire de l'inventaire pour mesurer des arbres puis dire quel est l'état de la forêt, finalement. Et pour ce qui est de la baie James, ça faisait presque un quart de siècle qu'il n'y avait pas eu d'inventaire. Là. Ça datait de 1997 ou 1998. Mais là que le nouveau programme, le ministère est retourné sur le terrain, puis on a accès au 4e inventaire décennal, donc il y a lieu de refaire ces analyses-là pour avoir un portrait à jour pour ce qui est de la forêt. Ça, c'était la grande recommandation pour ce qui est du portrait forestier. Le portrait minier, tout à l'heure, Régis en a fait un état là, du suivi, mais à l'intérieur du portrait minier, certaines des recommandations de Régis là, se retrouvent à l'intérieur de ça, qu'il y a des belles possibilités de développement. Encore faut-il qu'on puisse améliorer nos pratiques. Personne est contre le développement, mais il n'y a pas grand monde qui sont d'accord avec des pratiques qui pourraient causer préjudice à l'environnement. C'est un peu dans ce contexte-là qu'est écrit là, la plupart des portraits. Oui au développement, mais un développement durable. Le portrait faunique aussi, je vois mesdames de Faune en Or qui sont ici. Également, on fait des recommandations parce qu'on sait qu'à la baie James, sa partie sud a eu beaucoup de projets de recherche, là, mais plus on monte, là, 52, 53, là, il y a place pour beaucoup de projets de recherche là, pour améliorer nos connaissances en termes de faune. Le portrait hydrique, ça, c'est un petit bijou pour ceux qui ont rapport avec l'aménagement par bassin versant. Il y a toute la carte de bassins. On lui avait demandé de faire non seulement les bassins primaires, secondaires, mais on peut avoir accès également à la carte pour les bassins tertiaires et de niveau 4. Ça, quand on fait une planification qui s'adresse à l'ère de trappe, là, ça devient important d'avoir une meilleure division ou notion des bassins là, secondaires. Et le portrait énergétique, là-dedans, si vous vous adonnez à sa lecture. En passant, tous les portraits sont disponibles sur Internet, sur le site Internet www.crrntbj.ca. Je l'entends qui traduit à l'arrière, c'est important. Tout disponible. Puis si vous avez des questions, on est disponible. Bien, je reviens à celui énergétique. Moi, je l'ai trouvé très, très informatif parce qu'ils nous ont dressé un portrait non seulement de l'énergie hydraulique, l'hydroélectricité, mais on y parle également de toutes les autres facettes de l'énergie, comme les minéraux énergie, dont la baie James a des trésors là, dans son sous-sol là, de minéraux énergie. Il y a également, on dit là-dedans qu'un des plus grands potentiels photovoltaïques, les rayonnements solaires, là, pour pouvoir le transformer en énergie. La baie James également est au premier plan là-dessus. Alors, aujourd'hui, je voulais limiter ma présentation pour vous donner le goût d'aller voir tout ce qui se retrouve dans les portraits. Puis, si ça peut aider, vous êtes tous de différents horizons de recherche, mais il y a une mine d'informations là-dedans. Puis, peut-être qu'on va... Pas peut-être, sûrement qu'on va avoir à travailler ensemble dans le futur pour pouvoir élaborer le futur plan régional de développement intégré des ressources et du territoire pour le AU et JBACE James. Merci.
Thank you, John. So we have two for the next.
Ça fait pas 20 minutes, hein, ça fait...
Yeah, you got 5-minute sheets. There's Mary Gosselin and Muriel Gravel from Fauna.
So hello everyone again. We thought it was a good idea to come here today and present Faune en Or, since with a lot of people here, we got to work specifically on different projects. So just present to you who we really are as a whole. So Faune en Or is a non-profit organization. We mainly work in environment. We were founded in 2001. Our mission is through our regional projects and consulting services to ensure the sustainable development of JBACE James. And we work mostly integrated management of the territory, environment, education, and ecotourism. So under integrated management of the territory and environment, Marie-Ève is going to present you a couple of projects we're actually presently working on. We have aquatic habitat conservation field, forestry, mining, wildlife management, research and development of non-timber forest products, and the last one, which originally Fonana was based for, is education and ecotourism. Our team, we have a big team. We have 6 biologists. We have, well, our team of biologists present different field of expertise too. We have someone in ornithology, one in botany, one in marine biology, landscape conservation, forestry, and entomology. And on our équipe permanente, our permanent team, we have 2 wildlife technicians too. And during the summer, we go up to about 40 people, depending on the number of projects and the size of our projects. Our partners in clientele are mostly municipalities and communities, the mining companies, the forestry companies, les ministères, schools, and also universities that we started maybe 2 or 3 years ago to work with. So l'UQAT, l'UQAR, l'EQTR, l'UQAM. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to let Marie-Ève present our projects. We lead about between 20 and 30 projects every year, about 10 to 15 on a regional scale. So.
Since 2001, we did like 130 projects.
Yep.
Is it okay with you if I speak loud? Because I really need my paper. You need to. So, okay. Okay, I'll do my best because I really need my paper. So I'm not as good as Mireille in English, but I'll do my best. So in the integrated management and environment area, regarding to aquatic habitat conservation, we did a project on the distribution of lake sturgeon on the James Bay UHT territory. So we combine traditional knowledge and scientific literature in order to improve our knowledge of the distribution of the species. We are also currently doing a project on the identification of problems related to fish habitat on the West Winnipeg territory. So we work with the Department of the Natural Resources in West Winnipeg. Regarding fauna and environment, we did, as Joanne said, the wildlife portrait of the James Bay territory. We also work on the spruce grouse habitat quality index validation, and we want to do the same with the snowshoe hare on the territory. So we can, regarding to the forestry, we can conserve habitat quality. We also want to do a project on the nesting bank swallow on the James Bay territory in regard with the, I don't know, gravière? Gravel pit? Over the past few years, Fonana developed an important expertise in forestry. So we did numerous mandates on about forestry in accordance with the forest certification, the FSC, for Forest Stewardship Council. So we worked mainly with Barrette-Chappet and Chantier-Chibougamau. So we did the portrait of the pre-industrial forest and the current forest, so we can compare them both to identify the major issues. We also offer training sessions regarding the conservation of species at risk. We participate in the Access Road Management Plan, and we did a contract to delimitate watershed and sub-watersheds on the territory and identify, analyze. We did an analysis of the fragile sites. Fragile sites? Yeah. Also in forestry, we did a project on forest ecosystem bioindicators. So we identify saproxylix insects, insects that live in deadwood, to be bioindicators for the forest, and it was en fait c'était dans le cadre de la SADF, qui est la stratégie en aménagement durable des forêts. We want to develop. We are currently developing a project on the importance of the residual forest for birds following wood recuperation on the territory. So we try to reach financial. Okay. So overall, Faune en Or want to. C'est pour ça que j'avais besoin de mes papiers. We want to. Qu'est-ce qu'on disait, Mireille? On disait, en fait, accompagner les entreprises forestières, en fait, s'assurer que les pratiques forestières, puis que les pratiques minières, finalement, le développement minier, vont se faire de façon durable sur le territoire. Donc, c'est vraiment le cœur de la mission des dernières années, en fait, de Faune en Or. Sorry for my French. Regarding mining, we are consultants for Blackrock Metals, so we completed the environmental and social impact study. We also work with the local tree trappers in order to find fish habitat compensation selon le ministère de Pêche et Océan Canada. We also did this summer the survey of the winter habitat for the moose. And we are working on a project with UQTR, qui est l'Université du Québec à Trois-Rivières. It's a study on the sound effect of mining activities on wildlife, mainly birds. NTFP is a non-timber forest product. So we actually currently doing a research project with UQAC, Université du Québec à Chicoutimi, which is aiming at valorizing edible mushrooms for the boreal forest for pharmaceutical uses. We want to develop a project on the mid-term and long-term effects of matsutake, which is a mushroom. Do you know this species? It's a big white mushroom. Yeah. So we want to study the effects of harvesting on the forest and productivity. And in 2012, I think, or 13, we did a study on the edaphic and geomorphologic factors influencing the growth and distribution of the black marl in Nord du Québec. Donc la morille que tout le monde connaît et recherche très très souvent. Vous pouvez changer. In the area of education and ecotourism, there's a lot of pictures, so I'm gonna be faster. We do coaching and eco-friendly events, so we organize the General Assembly of COTA in WebMix2 in 2012. And we did the same thing in 2013 and the Waswanipi Band Council. Yeah, so we also do, like Mireille said, environmental education in schools. We also in ecotourism offer some, I don't know, like touristic tools. We did the Biodiversity Observation Network. It's a creation of trails and viewpoints all over the territory. So it was the first regional project that combined all the Cree and Jamaican communities. We also offer training, so in ornithology, mapping, GPS, mycology, composting. So it's a service that we offer. We do awareness in municipalities, communities in regard to illegal dumping or this kind of problems. We are the manager of the Parc Obalski in Chibougamau. If you want to visit it, you can come and see us. And we offer organization of symposium. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're moving along. We're doing quite well. Next on our list will be Nicole Fenton from UCAT.
Thank you. After I prepared this presentation, I realized that maybe some of you aren't familiar with UCAT. We are Université du Québec on Abitibi-Témiscamingue. So we are the newest, the youngest university in the UQ réseau, in the UQ network. And as you may know, each UQ is responsible for a part of the Quebec territory. So ours is Abitibi-Témiscamingue, obviously, but also Nord du Québec. So technically, we would be responsible for offering bachelor degrees, education level in the Nord du Québec as well as in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. So, if we could just back up for a minute. So instead of talking about a specific project today, I thought I'd do something similar to what Marie-Ève and Mireille just did, is to give a bit of an overview of the different projects that different professors and researchers at UCAT are undertaking in JBACE. And this is not at all an exclusive list. There's a lot going on. And I'd like to acknowledge my collaborators in the different departments. So I've got Hugo Asselin, who is in social sciences, Isabelle Demare, who's in the Institute for Mine and Environment, and Eric Rosa, who works with groundwater. Okay, thank you. So I based this presentation on the two axes of the workshop from the documentation. So the idea that we should maybe coordinate our efforts for knowledge acquisition, so not be duplicating ourselves across the territory, and also improving the transparency of the transfer of information, and also improving the participation of all the different people who live on the territory. Oh, wrong way. Thank you. So I was going to address these two axes by giving a brief overview of what we do on the territory at UCAT, and I summarize it essentially as most of our research is very applied. We're a very regional university. We're very anchored in the different cities and villages and territories where we're working. So we work a lot on supporting human and natural resource development in a sustainable manner, obviously. And then to deal with this, the second axe is how do we get that information out of the university? I know some people find that university professors tend to just stay in their ivory tower and not pass the information out. So I wanted to share some of our experiences about how we could have a better transfer. Okay, so if we look first at supporting human development, what's going on at UCAT? So some of the projects that we've been looking at is in the domain of education. There's a number of specialized programs at UCAT for First Nations and Northern students. We are experts in tele-education, education by distance. We've worked a lot with the communities up in the far northern part of Quebec as well. We also worked quite a bit in social sciences. We have a research chair that specifically acts towards the development of small communities. And they've looked at housing, the idea of a northern identity. What does la nordicité, what does that mean? As well as the impact of different types of resource developments on First Nations and northern communities. Obviously, we're a resource region, so there's lots of work on natural resource development. In terms of water, we have a group who's working on underground or groundwater projects based out of Amos, and they've done some characterization of the groundwater potential in different Bay James communities. Obviously, there's also lots and lots of work going on the minerals with the very big and active group at the Institut de Recherche en Mines et Environnement, so that's the Research Institute on Mines and Environment. They're specialized in mine environment, so how to develop mines with the least impact on the environment surrounding it. They work with different companies and look at the geology of the area to see what would be the best strategies. They're also specialized in mine restoration. So how to restore both sites, how to develop plans for upcoming mines for restoration, but also what do we do with the orphan sites that are left on the territory. Another axis, of course, is forestry. This is where I work at the chair in sustainable forest management. So in terms of forestry, we've been working on the fire history of the territories along north of the commercial forest. So that's been going on recently. That would that's an interesting thing because it feeds into dictating how much of that could or should be potentially harvested. We also look at the genetic variation in tree species in remote northern populations. So that will let us know if these populations are special, if they have a special need to be preserved because they have something genetically that's interesting that other populations don't have. And we also develop silvicultural and forest management practices that are specifically adapted for the environmental conditions in JBACE. If you look at more of a biology point of view, and interestingly enough, a lot of this work is in conjunction with the people in mine and environment. There have been studies on medicinal plants, on the biodiversity of non-forest and non-faunal aspects of our northern forests. We look at the response of different species to climate change, and I'm currently involved in a project. I have a student who's developing socially appropriate compensation in mining projects, and that's for the Eleanor project near Wimigi. So if we talk about getting the research out of the university, so this is our students outside and out of the campus in Rouen. What can we do to improve transfer of information and transparency and participation across the region? So I thought instead of the best way of approaching this would be say, well, we've done quite a bit of stuff. What have we done in the past that actually works? So from my point of view, the things that work is when we have a project in partnership. So where the northern communities are actively developing in the project development, then we have a really good communication, and it's very easy for us to make sure that everybody stays in the loop and the information gets out. Another thing that works really well is when there are dedicated resources for tech transfer. That ensures community participation and that the information gets disseminated. Another thing that also really works is when we know exactly who we should approach with our information. Sometimes it's not clear who should we be talking to, who would be interested in this information, who's the best point shoot, who's I'm an Anglophone who's losing my English. who's the best target for that information? So how can we make this work more often? So I would think that the topic of discussion of this workshop is really interesting because a dedicated organization who is assembling the research together would really be needed from a university researcher point of view, because then we know who to talk to. We have all that info. We know who's our partner. We would also like to have clear guidelines and expectations from the participants in participatory research, so we know what's expected of us. And also, it really helps to have a dedicated forum or resources to help the researchers, because as we all know, university professors are not always connected into the world around them. So if there's somebody who's helping them make that connection, it certainly makes the transfer of information flow a lot more. So I just wanted to conclude this part with saying that university researchers, at least at UCAT, do sincerely want to work with communities to develop these sorts of institutions and processes. However, the only thing that we ask is that we have some special requirements when we do research, is that we really need to maintain our independence and our neutrality. So we can offer results, but we can't always offer opinions. And I just wanted to finish off with one project that we're developing that I think fits in well with some things I've been talking about today, is we're trying to develop an industrial research chair on the integration of biodiversity and industrial development in the north. And our idea here is to increase our knowledge on the biodiversity of understudied organisms. I'm a specialist of mosses and bryophytes, that's why there's nice little pictures on there. And we want to do this via a research program which is integrating both scientific and traditional knowledge, and really a focused effort on tech transfer towards both the industries and the populations in the region. So if I come talking to you about this project in the future, you'll have seen it once here. Okay, thank you.
We have two more presenters. No, it's just two more, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Colin?
Colin's up at bat from the McGill University.
Thanks for this opportunity to speak to the organizers and everyone else for being here to listen. I want to focus on a particular case, and I'm not going to have time to draw out all the ramifications for the topics even of this workshop. But there has been, over the past 3 decades, a calamitous deterioration of the regional ecosystem of James Bay, of East Coast James Bay. Every coastal Cree community and onto Hudson Bay knows this and has felt it. I don't have a PowerPoint. I do have a story. It's a story that has several ingredients, including particularly Cree hunters' knowledge, observations from over the decades, a literature review that I'm currently involved in for the Migratory Birds Habitat Task Force that is led out of Tsasibi, and academic research that I've been directing during the first decade of the 2000s. We had a large transdisciplinary team working on a combination of protected areas and knowledge exchange toward the design and implementation of protected areas. We established a large terrestrial biodiversity reserve, the Bagumshumwa Maduskau Biodiversity Reserve, and we've been working with a number of coastal communities and with the Grand Council toward a Dowitch marine protected area, a regional marine protected area. But that's not my story today. My story is about the key issues that are of concern to the Migratory Birds Habitat Task Force, and that is the virtual disappearance of eelgrass throughout the coast of James Bay, and the precipitous decline not only of Canada geese and brants that depend on eelgrass, but a whole array of other waterfowl in particular. It's very difficult for people who were not present along that coast in the 1970s to appreciate the magnitude of the loss. But it used to be. I started work in 1976 in Wamingji and participated in hunting camps on Wamingji territory and also southern Tsasibi territory. There used to be windrows of eelgrass rolled up by the breakers that would be 200-300 meters long, and in some places so thick that you had to strain to step over them. Those are completely gone. I have not seen those for over 25 years. You see a few strands of discolored eelgrass on the beach. More recently, in the work that I've done with this team during the first decade of the 2000s that I mentioned, we've done quite a bit of diving, and you find a few remnants of eelgrass beds in places where eelgrass used to be thick enough to clog your engine if you tried to drive through it. It's incontestable from the perspective of anybody who was there in the 70s or early 80s that this has been a massive deterioration. Unfortunately, quite a lot of the monitoring work that came in post hoc and largely post collapse of this resource involves people who've never seen that. And so you get the sort of situation where, you know, when you go from 200,000 or 2 million cod to 20,000, and then people see a little blip upwards and suddenly there's 40,000 cod and everybody's celebrating and saying this is wonderful. But that's the magnitude of the recent recovery of eelgrass that you know, people have noticed that there's over the last couple of years there's a bit more eelgrass than there was 3 years ago. There still are some cycling, but it's way below the level that used to be there. What has happened? This is very political, and unfortunately the monitoring which has occurred is way too local geographically and way too narrow in temporal scope really to address what has happened, to demonstrate what has happened. Many Cree hunters say that it cannot be a coincidence that this precipitous decline began very quickly after the hydro works came into play. The mid-1980s kind of marks about the last point in time when we saw normal eelgrass beds. And that was also the beginning of a steady decline of Canada geese and of brants throughout the east coast of James Bay. Now, one of the problems with narrow, temporally and geographically narrow scope of studies is that the regional scale of this catastrophe has not been examined. Now, Hydro-Quebec has tended to the view that, well, the dominant current around James Bay, Hudson Bay and James Bay is a counterclockwise current. So that current should be taking the effluent of the La Grande, which has more than tripled now. The freshwater inputs from the La Grande have more than tripled. Should be carrying it out into Hudson Bay and dissipating it. And so a lot of the study has focused a little bit to the south of the La Grande estuary, but mostly to the north. And indeed, there are very extensive impacts going northward. People on the Belchers are reporting particulate matter that's caught up in the ice and is causing a very early melt because the particles, the sediments that end up in the ice are absorbing the sunlight, and the ice is simply not what it used to be. But one of the mysteries is, you know, taking the notion that salinity has been a major problem, and it probably has had major impacts for eelgrass. That's been demonstrated in lab tests. But then why has the eelgrass disappeared in Wamingji and all the way down to East Maine? If that dominant current is taking the fresh water basically out into Hudson Bay. And there are two answers. There are two things that we don't know the answer to. One is that the big tides driven from the north on the northwesterlies do push a lot of water back into James Bay at regular intervals. I don't think there is a study design out there to figure out how far back down the coast fresh water is being driven under these circumstances. The other thing is that the studies that have been done have focused perhaps too much on salinity and not enough on turbidity. And one of the things that we have been struck by in work in the diving that we've done, this multidisciplinary team, is how murky the water is. On a good day, you might be able to see 5 to 10 meters in the water. On a bad day, you're lucky to see 2 meters away. You can lose your dive buddy very quickly in these circumstances. This squares with observations of Cree hunters from 30, 40 years ago, and my own memories from that period, with the observation that water used to be a lot clearer. It was common for people to be able to see to the bottom at least the length of a freighter canoe paddle. You can't do that in just about anywhere now. Cree hunters at Wamingji recall an incident several years ago when, a few decades ago now, they killed a seal, the seal sank, and they were grappling the bottom to try to get the seal back, and were amazed to find at 30 feet that they were pulling up the roots of eelgrass, and that eelgrass was growing all the way to the surface. That has not been seen for decades. In fact, when you dive now to 10 meters, it is dark. There is no photosynthesis happening. You don't see anything green much below 5 meters. And I've been diving not only near the coast of James Bay, but on islands way out in the middle, and it's the same story out there. So we think that photosynthesis, the impacts of turbidity on photosynthesis are an issue. So how does all of that turbidity, how does that become a regional phenomenon? Why is the turbidity, like at least the assumption that the fresh water is not just getting flushed out into James Bay? Well, of course, again, you have the question of the wind-driven counter-influence of the high tides. Not just wind-driven, but it's when you get the lunar and the wind in combination that you get these massive tides pushing back into James Bay, funneling a lot of water from Hudson Bay down into James Bay. But the other thing that we really lack is enough oceanography to understand the nature of those currents. The story is not nearly as simple as this dominant counterclockwise current. In fact, there are a series from the knowledge we do have of what they call cyclonic gyres. So when that current funnels out around Cape Jones between Sasabi and Wamachtu, not all the water funnels back out. There is actually a rotational counterclockwise circle within James Bay. And when you get out into Richmond Gulf, there's another counterclockwise circle. And when you go further north in Hudson Bay, another one. So what's happening is a lot of that turbidity, in fact, is not just getting kind of spilled out eventually into the Atlantic or something, that it is recycling and amplifying, we believe. But these are casual observations. There has not been a systematic program on a regional scale to actually be able to test these things. And that is at least one message that I wanted to leave from this, that until there is a strategy for regional marine monitoring, we're not going to be able to answer these questions. Obviously, there are interests that have an awful lot at stake, one way or the other, in how we explain these phenomena. How much time have I used? Oh. Okay. Well, let me just say two more things about the dynamics. Cree hunters say that when a resource gets used, it's healthy for the resource. And this bears out in all kinds of circumstances. But in the case of eelgrass, they say when you've got several hundred or a couple thousand geese sitting on these huge, they're really at low tide, like meadows of eelgrass. The geese are grazing, they're pruning the eelgrass, often there's dabbling at the roots, and there's an awful lot of fertilization going on. So what happens when the eelgrass disappears? The geese are less and less interested and available. So you get a vicious circle, a positive feedback system where fewer geese mean fewer eelgrass, less eelgrass means fewer geese, and that's one. Another one that Crees observe is the relationship of eelgrass to turbidity itself. Eelgrass has been termed by other people the mangroves of this environment. They filter the water, they cleanse the water. They break when these meadows are developed, and there used to be in the hundreds of square kilometers of these eelgrass meadows. They used to break the force of the waves and so on. So the bottom was not getting stirred up as much in the shallow areas. You go now to a shallow bay on the east coast, and you've got a strong west wind. The water is the color of creamed coffee. That's that much silt that's getting stirred up. That was not seen 30, 40 years ago. So again, you get this feedback cycle. The eelgrass needs light to grow. The eelgrass filters the water so that it can grow in some teleological sense. And then when the eelgrass drops below a certain threshold, the water gets even dirtier, and it becomes even less possible for the eelgrass to reestablish itself. So the interest of the Migratory Birds Habitat Task Force is to bring back the conditions in which the eelgrass and the waterfowl, I've mentioned Canada geese and brants, but there are several other species that are in real trouble. One of the problems, the diving ducks and other waterfowl have been very hard hit. And one of the problems about that, well, partly because the little fish that they depend on find refuge in eelgrass beds. But the other thing is that the fish that are still there, they can't see anymore because the water's too dirty. So if you're a diving duck, you're in trouble. It used to be that if you ran 2 or 3 hours by freighter canoe down the coast of James Bay, you'd be flushing up flocks of 200-300 guillemots, whole squaws, various species, at regular intervals. And now you run that same circuit and you might see 3 or 4 birds there, 5 or 7 there. You know, it's just a dramatic impoverishment of that whole trophic system. Of course, the people want back what they've lost. But they understand that this is not going to come back without intervention. It's important, it's absolutely essential to figure out what are the root causes of this deterioration and to reverse those to give this ecosystem a fighting chance of recovery. Now, this is not to deny that there are other factors. I haven't mentioned climate change, I haven't mentioned isostatic uplift and various of the other factors that probably play a part. But I'm out of time, so I won't go into those.
Thank you, Colin. So I think we're down to our last knowledge acquisition in collaboration with Northern Communities. Jose Guerin Lajoie.
Est-ce que c'est plus simple si moi je change les...
Est-ce que vous m'avez donné votre présentation?
Oui, elle est là.
Désolé.
C'est correct.
C'est comme vous voulez, madame.
Ben, je sais pas si à ce moment est-ce que je cache, si moi je viens changer. Non, moi, je peux, bon, si on peut tasser le... OK. OK. Ça va être plus simple. Bon, et, bonjour, Kwe everybody. So I'm very honored to have been invited here and representing the Centre d'études nordiques or Center for Northern Studies. So this entity was created in 1961 by the Quebec government, and it's grouping 59 professors from 9 institutions and englobing for a total of 300 researchers, including the graduate students, doctoral fellows, and also the research assistants. So it's a multidisciplinary group working in biology, microbiology, geography, geology, engineering, archaeology, and landscape management. So you have the website addressed here. And so the mission of the CEN, I will say CEN from now on, is to contribute to the sustainable development of northern regions by way of an improved understanding of environmental change, to analyze the evolution of northern environments in the context of climate warming and accelerated socio-economic change, and to train highly qualified personnel in the analysis and management of cold regions, ecosystems, and geosystems. So, and finally, in partnerships with the government, industry, and northern communities, to play a crucial role in environmental stewardships and to develop adaptation strategies in the circumpolar north. So there's three main research axes. So to study the structure and function of northern environments, the continental, not marine, for our part, and also the evolution of these environments regarding the planetary change, climate change, and also evaluating the risk associated with these changes, and also developing some adaptation strategies. So here's a map of the réseau. There's including 9 research stations distributed in Quebec, James Bay, Nunavik, also Baffin Island, Ellesmere Island, and also some 95 climate stations distributed along this territory. So here's the Radisson at the far left up, so Radisson Station, Lac à l'eau claire, and the other ones are mostly in Nunavik or Ellesmere. And here's the Wapmagoostui Kuujjuarapik research station. That's the community science center that has been built in 3 years ago. So it's a nice green building built with lots of wood, with solar panels. So it's used as a conference center, but it has been used for the health. I know from the Cree Health Board recently, and it's also some places to meet with different associations, also conference, and it's more and more used by the community and for the community. That's the goal of this center. So some examples of some studies that are being done with the different professors and researchers are terrestrial fauna management and conservation. So there's habitat studies of the caribou, of the wolf, moose, and bear, some habitat studies of the migratory patterns, and also the life history, behavioral studies, and also human cumulative impacts. So also another group of studies is plant biodiversity and ecology and paleoecology. That's kind of the relationships between the living organisms and their environment, but in the past. So there's a lot of like looking at the sediments in the bottom of the lakes and in the peatlands to reconstitute the climate, how the climate was back then, and also all the dynamics of the shrubs growing more, and shrub encroachment, and also the moving of the tree line up north. So some researchers looking at that. Some conservation also studies, and also plant community dynamics, and some aquatic ecosystems responses to environmental change. So looking at some gas fluxes with the permafrost melting. There's we call that thermocast ponds forming when the permafrost thaws. And there's some measurements of the fluxes, gas fluxes, that methane fluxes that are emanating from. So it was used to capture some carbon or methane, and now with the thawing of the permafrost, it kind of releases these gases. Some studies about that, and also all the communities in the fresh water, like cyanobacteria, zooplankton, fish, and also the other organisms. And also some studies looking at people-environment relationships in the north with some paleoarchaeology. So using some techniques, we see like a grain of pollen magnified there, and some studies looking at the tree rings to date the age of the trees, and also looking at how the resources were used and exploited in the past and now. And all the traditional knowledge aspects, mostly looking at the ecological environmental knowledge. So more and more incorporating these aspects within the Western science. And finally, the territorial development and natural risks. So looking at the permafrost studies, it's mostly up in Nunavik and Nunavut, but also looking at all the coastal erosions and the river dynamics, and also the quaternary paleogeography. So that's the kind of the past history and how the landscape has been formed. So that all these studies generate lots and lots of data. So one of the ways the CEN has found is to put in line some of these data that are available for free, and like all electronic data. So this is a portal on the website of the CEN. where all the climate station data and all the permafrost studies, drilling data are there, some thesis, some conference proceedings. So more and more some researchers putting data on there to make the data available for the most people possible. And another portal is the Polar Data Catalog. It has been implemented within the International Polar Year, and it's kind of metadata. So it's not the raw data, but more and more some researchers are putting some raw data there, but it's mostly what is the studies going on there. So it describes the methodology, who is involved, the researcher. You have to some contact information, so you can do some research by clicking and by searching by place, by name, by theme. So that's more and more data coming in. With it has been under ArcticNet initiative. So, and we have been part also of integrated regional impact studies for, this one has been made for Nunavik and Nunavut. So it's to put like from knowledge to action. So to put the science and put it in simple language and doing some summaries. And so the stakeholders and the people making decisions can look at the science that has been made in these studies, and a bit like the one we described, but for northern parts. So we have been, and there's synthesis and recommendations that have been extracted from these reports, and all these are available on the ArcticNet website in French, English, and Inuktitut too. And recently, like 3 years ago, we started a school program that is called Avativut. It has been implemented in all the 14 communities across Nunavik, and we're working with the Kativik School Board, so we're involving the students, the high school students, in taking real measurements in their environment. So there's following scientific protocols, and we built some activities to help them understand all the concepts behind. So they take measurements on berries, snow, ice observation, permafrost, and traditional knowledge that some interviews they ask having some elders coming into the classroom. So there's a big database that is adding, so it's only 2 years that it has been started for the berries, and the ice module has been tested this year in Kuujjuarapik. So that's mostly for now with the Inuit school, but it could be something that could be implemented also with the Cree school board too, if there's an interest. So there's all the web forum. The classes can communicate between themselves and ask questions and look at the data from the other villages, so they can see, oh, the ice is like frozen solid here, but what's the date for this village? So there's some ice observation of the breakup and the freeze up and breakup. And there's all and they also can ask questions directly to the researchers. And there's a section where if people see a new species, observing a new species in their environment, they can go on the website and post a picture and ask questions if they want this species to be identified by a specialist. So that's something that is being developed. So we did some video clips to explain all the protocols and concepts in a fun way, appealing for teenagers. So there's some series here on the berries and some on the ice. And so that's all available in French and English on the website of Avativut. And last year we started a project with the Cree community of Wapmagooshtui, looking at the northern plants together, like researchers, and taking some elders and youth going out on the land, camping together and eating together. So we found that it was a better way to gather some traditional knowledge than just doing some like regular interviews around the table. So just go out on the land and like live together for a while, and so making the exchanges more easy and friendly. So and like a confidence link building. So that was cross-generational. So we also have had the youth asking questions themselves to the elders. So there was some knowledge transmission there too, and some collection of data. And we had a filmmaker that came with us from Wapikoni Mobile. I know they're going in many Cree nations and all the native nations around in Quebec. So we hired a filmmaker there, and we did a 20-minute documentary. If anybody is interested to see it, I have some copy here. So that the objectives were really to interest the youth in science. And our best reward was one of the youth going back to the school after this camp and going back to study arts and science in Algonquin College. So we were very, very happy with that. And also to characterize all the environmental knowledge from the elders. So that's some of the activities we did with the people, with the youth and elders. So herbal preparations, visit of different plant habitats, plant collection, storytelling. There was some hunting activities, fishing, individual interviews, and science workshop with the youth, showing them how to use a GPS and looking at maps and so on. So we found that the keys of the success of such initiative was really to involve the local people there. There's the Melvin Masti, that was the local coordinator, Matthew Mukash, who was the translator after for all the dialogues to be translated. So it's the film has been made in Cree with English and French subtitles. So, and to respect the local pace and dynamics, and to be creative and produce nice outreach. So for us, it was really important to go back to the community and present, to be the premiere of the film there to them, so before going elsewhere in Congress or elsewhere. So we went there back in last December, and we did many presentations in the schools too. And finally, I will finish. The Sen hired also a kind of science coordinator that was there for the whole school year and organizing some after-school activities related to science. So to make the science more appealing to the youth, so he made a Facebook page and related with the youth in the community, and organized also some science activities for the whole community. So thank you.